The alarm clock rang shrilly at 6 in the morning, and without opening my eyes, I groaned muffledly, turning over with difficulty to turn it off. The sharp sound seemed to penetrate straight into the skull, shaking every cell of the brain. Please, God, at least 10 more minutes, was my silent prayer, addressed somewhere into the void. I lay there, motionless, looking at the ceiling, realizing that this morning would be no exception and I would still have to get up. Last night was hard. Not that physically, no, I didn't work late at night, didn't play sports, and didn't even deal with the rubble at work. But the emotional load seems to have squeezed the last strength out of me. Maria, my wife of 22 years, once again took it upon herself to make me think about issues that I preferred not to think about at all. No, she wasn't trying to literally drive me crazy, but her obsession with one specific topic, which was already pretty boring, began to erode my patience, like drops of water that wear away a stone for years. She kept talking about her, as if she hoped that by repeating the same thing over and over again, she would achieve her goal. I began to seriously wonder if my nerves would hold up and if I would have the patience not to go crazy. And now, early Monday morning, when the world was just beginning to awaken, I was forced to get out of bed and prepare for a new day, despite the fatigue that enveloped my body and mind like a sticky veil. You may ask, what were we talking about? It's simple, or rather, not easy. Maria convinced herself that at 40 our lives urgently needed renewal, and not in some practical aspect like home renovation or travel. No, it was about sex life, as she put it. She and her psychology teacher friend, Mark Billings, came up with an idea that she found inspiring and innovative. According to her, we needed to push the boundaries and try partner exchange. Exchange. She spoke about it with such enthusiasm, as if she was offering something as mundane as renewing a subscription to her favorite magazine. I finally forced myself to get up and turn off the alarm before it rang again. In the dim light that barely penetrated the curtains, the room seemed even more comfortable, and the thought that Maria would not have to get up for another hour aroused envious annoyance in me. Her world still belonged to the silence of sleep, and mine had already invaded the merciless stream of responsibilities and anxieties. I had several important meetings scheduled for the morning, one with the CEO and another with an HR representative from Atlanta. I had no plans to change jobs anytime soon, but such contacts are always useful. You never know when the opportunity or need to use such connections will arise. As I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and slowly ran the razor across my chin, the frozen reflection got me thinking, how did it get to this crazy situation? When exactly did Maria begin to show this strange interest in the idea of expanding her horizons? After all, this didn't start yesterday. No, she had been hinting at this for several months, sometimes casually, sometimes persistently, with enviable persistence. I tried to remember where exactly her desire was rooted, at what moment it arose, and where this need for variables in our formula came from, as she put it in one of our recent conversations. I finished shaving, but thoughts continued to circle in my head like annoying flies, giving me no rest. I was a senior in high school when I first noticed a new freshman named Maria Donaldson. She was a quiet, slightly shy girl who didn't seem to take the attention of her peers too easily. Her thin, almost frail figure and short, cropped blonde hair set her apart from others. But what really caught my attention was her smile. It was a smile in which sincerity and some kind of elusive softness were mixed, which made the heart clench, as if from the touch of something incredibly bright. Back then, being busy with my high school classes, I didn't do anything to approach her or start a conversation. No, I only occasionally caught myself thinking that my glances at her were becoming a little longer than they should have been. Time passed, and I almost forgot about Maria. But a few years later, when she was already a third-year student and I was completing my college studies, life brought us together again. This happened at a school match dedicated to graduates. That day was clear, with a light breeze, which was pleasantly refreshing after the summer heat. As a former high school football player, I was allowed to be on the sideline during the game. I was standing surrounded by familiar faces, but suddenly I felt something catch my eye. It was her. Maria has changed. Her childhood thinness had given way to a slender, toned figure that looked like she spent a lot of time at the gym or working out. Now her blonde hair fell just below her shoulders, framing a face in which childish softness had been replaced by sophistication. On the field, where she was doing a warm-up, her movements were light, as if she was dancing. The gaze involuntarily lingered on her figure-long, slender legs, emphasized by sports shorts, strong shoulders, and posture, indicating that she knows her worth. She was about 5'6" or 5'7" tall, which made her a little shorter than me, but still tall and graceful. Her blue eyes, glowing with life, stood out against the tan that she seemed to have acquired from long hours in the sun. Her breasts, supported by her sports bra, bounced slightly in time with her movements as she performed the exercises. It was not a challenge, not an attempt to attract attention, but simply a naturalness that made you look at her with bated breath. I watched her, fascinated. This was not just a girl who had once appeared in my school life. Now she looked like an adult, confident woman whose charm was impossible to ignore. I was still in good physical shape despite the years that had passed. Sports have always been an important part of my life, and I ran 3 to 4 times a week to keep myself fit. It didn't make me an athlete, but it did make me feel confident when I looked in the mirror. I'm exactly 6 feet tall, which makes me quite noticeable in a crowd, but not so tall that I feel awkward. My name is Troy Stutzman. Now I am 43 years old. I am 3 years older than Maria, and my life has developed quite stable. I hold the position of middle manager at a manufacturing company, more precisely at Acme Manufacturing. This is where I started working right after I received my associate's degree in business and have remained dedicated to my profession. Over time, I went further, achieving a master's degree to strengthen my knowledge and give myself more opportunities to grow. Now, a little about appearance. I have brown hair and brown eyes, which may sound simple, but I've heard that a lot of people like this combination. And yes, I still have all my teeth, which makes me happy. Moreover, I have retained thick hair, which is probably due to good genetics. It's already a little gray, but not so much that it makes me look old. I don't have abs, but my figure still remains slim thanks to running. I look pretty decent in running shorts and a light tank top, and to be honest, I like it. But Maria, my wife and the love of my life, has changed. Her body now reflects the lifestyle customary for 40-year-old mothers. She was slightly rounded, but her ample breasts only became a more noticeable feature. She is no longer the fit and energetic cheerleader I met many years ago, but to me she remains the most beautiful woman in the world. Her changes seem natural to me. They remind me of what we went through together, the years we spent side by side, and how much I love her. Her blue eyes still sparkle with the same sparkle that captivated me many years ago, and not a single wrinkle or roundness will change that. Let's go back to the memories. After that school match, when I was standing on the sideline watching the game, I decided to approach Maria. My heart was beating a little faster than usual, but I did it anyway. I introduced myself to her, trying to look confident, although inside I felt completely different. Her reaction surprised me. It turned out that she remembered me from the time when I was a high school student. I was pleasantly surprised that I remained in her memory. During the conversation, she mentioned that she had recently broken up with her boyfriend, and, fortunately for me, she offered to meet. She invited me to spend the evening with her, and I happily agreed. This was the moment that became the beginning of our story. The evening spent with her was filled with lightness and warmth, and her smile finally convinced me that I wanted to get to know her better. However, I had a great time because I was with Maria, and we found something to talk about. She was wondering whether she should stay in our city and complete her first 2 years of college, as I did, before joining the teaching faculty. My plan was to earn a bachelor's degree in business in 2 years from a 4-year college an hour away from our town, and then possibly enroll in graduate school. Just remember the old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Maria and I started dating on those weekends when I could come home. I had a part-time job near college, so we didn't see each other as often as we wanted. Out of respect for her, I did not insist on intimacy, well, with the exception of kissing. Anyway, we continued dating throughout her senior year, that summer, even though I was interning 100 miles away from home, and then her senior year, my third year at a liberal arts college. Then came her prom. We received special permission so that I could be her companion. The graduate's good reputation and clean file helped the administration allow me to attend the event. I was just finishing my third year and was feeling a little overconfident. That night, our lives changed. After the ball, we stopped by the party that took place after it. But soon Maria whispered in my ear that she wanted to finish the holiday together, alone. We were both nervous. I had a little experience with sex, but it was mostly casual relationships, and all this became a thing of the past when I started dating Maria seriously. Maria, although she was an adult, was an innocent girl. You've never seen someone blush until you see a natural blonde blush. We made love again that night. Finally, around 6 in the morning, I woke her up, we got dressed, and I took her home. I'm sure her mother figured out what we did because she was very perceptive, but I also think Mary's father believed his princess would never stoop to premarital sex. In the summer after her graduation, we managed to have a couple more meetings, but they were quite rare, and I always used a condom. In mid-July, Maria and I had a serious conversation after watching the film. Troy, I've missed the last 2 months. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow to find out for sure, but I think I'm pregnant. She paused to let me take in the news. I sighed heavily. Well, I guess you shouldn't be surprised. We hugged and kissed, and then started planning the wedding. Since our families lived nearby, we did not need to organize hotels and rooms. There were only about 100 or 2 relatives, and if we add friends and classmates, we needed a site for at least 300 people. Maria and I shamefully confessed to our parents that very soon they would become grandparents. This conversation was one of the most difficult moments of our lives, and even years later, I can still remember how nervously we looked at each other before telling the truth. Of course, this was not only a test for us, but also a moment that raised many questions about the future. Parents, as expected, had mixed reactions. Mary's father, a man of strict principles and imposing character, flew into a rage as soon as he heard our words. His face turned red, and it seemed like he was having a hard time restraining himself from screaming. He called me a lot of unpleasant words, each of which, as it seemed to me then, fell on me with the force of a hammer. His disappointment was obvious, and I realized that it was not only that we had violated their expectations, but also that, in his opinion, I was not a worthy companion for his daughter. However, time, as often happens, has smoothed out the rough edges. Gradually, his anger subsided, and although he and I never became friends, over the years we were able to reach a certain level of mutual understanding. At family gatherings and holidays, we talked calmly, avoiding old grievances. Our mothers, on the other hand, took control of the situation and immediately began discussing how best to proceed. They decided that the wedding should take place in August so that Maria's belly would not yet be too noticeable, or at least not attract too much attention. In their eyes, it was a matter of honor to preserve at least the appearance of the traditional order of things. By then, of course, having children out of wedlock was no longer unusual, but we were raised differently. In the families where we grew up, honor and respect for family values came first, and this forced us to make compromises in order to please the older generation. Plans came together surprisingly quickly. First, the timing was discussed, then the venue, menu, and even decor details. Our wedding turned out to be modest but cozy. It was an August day, warm and sunny, with a light breeze that pleasantly refreshed the guests. Maria looked stunning in her white dress, which successfully hid the slight changes in her figure. Her smile that day was perhaps the most sincere and joyful I have ever seen, and this image is forever etched in my memory. After the wedding, our life together began, full of new challenges and decisions. I understood that I had to take responsibility for my family, and therefore I did not return to university. Instead, I decided to complete my education by taking evening classes. This was before the era of online learning, so I had to juggle work and study, spending my days at work and my evenings in the classroom. I landed an entry-level position at Acme Manufacturing, a company where I ended up working my entire career. In the early days, it was hard work, requiring attention to detail and a willingness to learn every step of the way. But I knew that by starting with the basics, I could better understand the structure of the company and work my way up over time. Thanks to my diploma, I earned enough so that we could rent a small but cozy apartment where our family life began. Each month, we managed to save a little money, creating a fund for the down payment on the house we dreamed of buying. These modest savings seemed like a true symbol of our efforts and dreams for a better future for our growing family. We did not live in luxury, but we lived with hope and confidence that we would overcome all difficulties together. 6 months after our wedding, Jamie Ann Stutzman, our firstborn, our little miracle, was born. Her birth marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, in which family played a major role. Maria's pregnancy was surprisingly easy. She had virtually no complaints about the morning sickness that other women often reported, and she dealt with the changes in her body with surprising calm. Every day she glowed with a special inner light, which only intensified as the moment approached when we would see our daughter for the first time. Childbirth, of course, was not an easy ordeal. They lasted 10 hours, 10 long, exhausting hours for Maria, which seemed like an eternity to her. But according to doctors, for the first birth, it was relatively fast. I was nearby all the time, trying to support her, although I felt helpless. Every effort she made, every expression of pain on her face tore my heart, but in the end, we were rewarded. When I saw our daughter for the first time, everything we had been through immediately became meaningless. Jamie was beautiful, a tiny creature with rosy cheeks and soft, plump lips. She was our dream come true. The first time after her birth passed relatively calmly. Jamie turned out to be a surprisingly calm child, and this was a real blessing for us. She slept all night without making a noise unless she woke up from hunger. Maria decided to breastfeed her, and this experience, as she later admitted, became for her a special, even sacred moment of connection with her daughter. Her beautiful breasts increased by at least a size, which did not go unnoticed by me. But what impressed me most was how selflessly she devoted herself to motherhood, finding joy in it. When Maria recovered from childbirth, our sex life resumed. Everything became the same as before, or even better. I always felt that we were happy together, that our closeness filled our relationship with warmth and confidence in each other. Maria decided not to continue her education, despite the fact that she once had ambitions in this field. Instead, she chose to work part-time to help with family expenses and save for our children's education. This choice gave her the opportunity to be there for Jamie and at the same time support our overall budget. Our family did not stop at one child. A couple of years later, Mick, our first son, arrived. The birth of our second child became less stressful for us. We already knew what to expect and learned to cope with the difficulties that accompanied the early years of a baby's life. Mick was a more energetic child than his older sister and had more to worry about, but this only made our lives even more fulfilling. A few more years later, our family became complete when Stacy was born. Her appearance added even more joy and vitality to our home. With the birth of our third child, we both realized that our family was now truly complete. We agreed that 3 children is more than enough for us to feel happy and confident in the future. In order to no longer worry about protection, I decided to have the procedure done quickly and without complications. This way, I was able to save Maria from having to take pills, which was a significant relief for her. Our house was filled with laughter, chores, and little joys. We lived in constant motion, adapting to the rhythm of life with 3 children, and every year we realized more and more that, despite the difficulties, we had achieved what we had once dreamed of, becoming a real family. We bought our first house before Mick was born. It was a modest home in a quiet area where small houses were lined up in neat rows, and in the mornings you could hear children's voices and the barking of the neighbors' dogs. The house wasn't too big, but it was cozy, with a small lawn out front and a tiny backyard where you could put a kiddie pool or have a picnic. We lived there for about 6 years until we decided our growing family needed more space. Mick had just started walking, and it became obvious to us that every year there would be less and less space. Moving to a larger home was an important step. This was a new stage, a symbol of the beginning of a more mature and comfortable life. Now we still live in this house. Its spacious rooms and bright windows have witnessed many happy and difficult moments of our lives. The children have grown up faster than we could have imagined. Time seemed to blur as we followed their first steps, school holidays, graduations, and birthdays. Jamie is now in his third year of college. She chose a direction that is close to her and often tells us about her successes and difficulties. Her determination has always inspired us, and I couldn't be prouder of how smart and independent she has become. She has a regular boyfriend whom she has been dating for several years. The young man often visits us, and it seems that he is serious in his intentions. Perhaps in a year or so we will hear news about the engagement. Jamie has always been a sensible person, and I believe she will make the right choice. Mick, our second child, just started his freshman year of college. His student life is completely different from Jamie's. Mick has always been more easygoing, energetic, and charming. He seems to absorb the joy of life and tries to share it with everyone around him. Now he's busy trying to charm every girl he talks to. His smile and confidence seem to be doing the trick, but he doesn't settle on one thing just yet. We often joke that he inherited his charm from me, but I know that there is room in his heart for something real. He's just still searching. Stacy, our youngest, is a senior in high school. She grows up surprisingly independent and serious, often reminding me of Maria in her youth. She has been in several serious relationships, but as far as we know, she is not currently dating anyone. Of course, we worry like any parents, but we try to give her space. We hope that she still maintains her innocent status for a little longer, but we realize that at a certain stage our children begin to make their own decisions. We can only be there to support them. We never had any serious problems with children. Of course, the usual difficulties associated with growing up arose from time to time. The first teenage rebellions, misunderstandings, moments when they preferred to hide something from us, all this happened, but it always remained within the normal range. The hardest part, though, was coming to terms with the idea that we couldn't keep them small, protected, and innocent in the face of the harsh world forever. Every time they faced life's challenges, we felt our hearts break as parents, wanting to spare them pain or disappointment. But it seems to be an inevitable part of parenting that everyone goes through. Now, looking back, I realize how quickly the years flew by. It seems like just yesterday we were putting them to bed, reading bedtime stories, and rejoicing at their first steps. And now they are already on the threshold of adulthood, with their own dreams, plans, and worries. And while it's a little sad, we're proud of the people they're becoming and can't wait to see what life has in store for them. When Stacy started school, Maria decided it was time to pursue a career again and found herself working in the school system. She got a job as a teacher's assistant in one of the elementary schools in our city. This is a cozy building with spacious, bright classrooms and a lively courtyard, which is filled with children's voices during breaks. Her job is to help teachers work with children individually and in small groups, maintain order in the classroom, and ensure that every child feels included and understood. This position was ideal for Maria. She always knew how to find a common language with children, but she did not want to take on the full burden of responsibility that lies with teachers. She enjoys sharing how she helps students solve math problems, learn the alphabet, or master reading. She doesn't even need to attend parent-teacher meetings, which relieves her of unnecessary stress and gives her the opportunity to focus on the most enjoyable part of the job, direct interaction with children. While Maria built her career around school, I worked my way up the corporate ladder at a manufacturing plant. Having once started in the production workshop, I gradually moved forward. My first big win was being promoted to supervisor and then becoming a manager. This path was not easy. It required not only hard work and perseverance, but also a willingness to constantly learn and take responsibility. I was able to combine my practical experience with my master's degree, which allowed me to stand out among my colleagues. I rose to my current level younger than most others in similar positions, a fact that did not go unnoticed. From time to time, recruiters from other manufacturing companies contact me to offer career opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, I was going to meet with one of those recruiters today. This was a preliminary meeting to understand who wanted to interview me and what exactly they could offer. Such meetings always give me mixed feelings. On the one hand, it's nice to know that my experience and skills are valued on the market. On the other hand, I'm still happy with my current job and don't see an urgent need to change anything. My current position brings me satisfaction. I have developed a good relationship with the senior management of the company, which I believe is one of the key success factors. Managers respect my opinion, and I often participate in discussions on strategic issues. At the same time, I find common ground with the union, which is not an easy task in our industry. This helps create a stable and productive atmosphere in the enterprise. My team regularly achieves its goals, not only in terms of production volume, but also in terms of quality. We almost always stay within the given budget, which adds to my respect from management. I am proud that I was able to create a team that works coherently and efficiently, and I try to be the kind of leader with whom it is pleasant to cooperate. This job requires a lot of effort from me, but it gives me the feeling that I am making a real contribution to the success of the company. Now let's move on to recent events that began with the beginning of the new school year for Maria. Her work at the elementary school always brought her joy and satisfaction, but this time everything turned out to be a little different. A new teacher came to the class where she worked as an assistant, a young teacher who had just graduated from university. His name was Mark Billings, and as a new teacher, he needed the help of an experienced assistant to successfully cope with the workload. Despite the fact that Maria is not a certified teacher, she has accumulated enough knowledge and practical skills to be not only a support, but also a real support. She knew very well how to organize a classroom, create a user-friendly and understandable curriculum, and how to cope with the daily challenges that educators face. I first heard the name Mark Billings one ordinary evening when we were discussing her work over dinner. Maria had just returned from a teacher training course before the start of the school year and was in high spirits. She spoke with sincere enthusiasm about what an intelligent and mature person he was and how much his ideas could influence the lives of children. Her words were filled with respect and admiration, but this admiration concerned exclusively his professionalism and approach to teaching. She talked about his methods of engaging even the most difficult students and his fresh ideas that inspired her to new ways of working in the classroom. It is noteworthy that in these stories, she never mentioned what this wonderful teacher looked like. Her focus was solely on his personality, intelligence, and enthusiasm. At that moment, I was not worried. Maria and I always had mutual trust, and I knew that she would never give reason for doubt. Because, to be honest, we still had a good relationship. Our sex life, although it had changed over the years, remained healthy and satisfying for both of us. She became more mature, focused on love, intimacy, and mutual giving, rather than on the stormy and passionate impulses of youth. These changes seemed natural and normal to me for a relationship that had lasted more than 2 decades. I continued to take care of my body, which adds confidence. I still run 2 or 3 times a week and go to the gym in the evenings twice a week. This helps me stay in shape despite my age. Maria also takes care of herself, although her approach is less intense. She walks a lot, preferring long walks to the gym. Over the years, she gained a little weight, and her figure took on the shape that is commonly called mommy. But to be honest, that never detracted from her appeal to me. Her feminine figure looks beautiful in almost any outfit, be it a casual dress or her favorite loungewear. For me, she still remains a beautiful and desirable woman who embodies the comfort and warmth of our home. Our relationship is more than a physical connection. This is respect, care, and confidence in each other. We had been together long enough to find a balance that suited us both, and I was confident that it remained as strong as ever. Over time, I began to notice some changes in our daily lives. They weren't harsh or alarming, but they still caught my attention. For example, Maria began going to school on days that were previously considered exclusively working days for teachers. Previously, she did not need to do this. She always stayed at home if there were no classes. This was a slight deviation from her usual schedule, and although I didn't think much of it, the thought crossed my mind that her work might be taking up more time and energy than before. At the same time, her evening routine also changed. Since I continued to exercise in the evenings after work, be it jogging or going to the gym, she began to leave the house more often. Several times a week, she met with the girls, as she called her new friends. These were women from her work environment and, perhaps, neighbors with whom she struck up friendships. They usually went to dinner, sometimes went for evening walks, or attended some city events. This became an important part of her life, and I saw that these meetings brought her joy. Maria and I talked a lot about this topic, and she explained that she was starting to feel empty nest syndrome. Jamie and Mick had already left home to pursue their adult lives, and Stacy, although still with us, no longer needed the close attention that she required when the children were younger. Stacy became increasingly focused on school, friends, and her interests, so Maria felt she had more free time that she didn't know how to fill. She admitted that she needed something new to feel more alive and fulfilled. That is why she began to build a new social circle. For her, this became a way not only to distract herself, but also to find herself in new circumstances. She wanted more communication, new emotions, and the feeling that her life was continuing to develop. I understood this and tried to support her. It seemed to me that these changes were quite natural for a person who had been focused on children for years and was now faced with the need to rebuild his life in new conditions. I saw how such changes breathed new energy into her. Her eyes began to glow again with that sparkle that I loved so much in her youth. This was a sign that she was moving in the right direction. For me, the main thing was to know that she felt happy, and I had no doubt that her outings with friends and new hobbies would help her cope with this difficult stage of life. One of the friends Maria began spending time with was the wife of her new colleague, Mark Billings, named Susie. Susie, I soon learned, had dropped out of college when she was young and seemed to love loud parties. At first glance, she was sociable and cheerful, but her carefree attitude towards life sometimes seemed too easy. At first, I didn't know all the details about her, and Maria described her only briefly, mostly in a positive way, as a good conversationalist and a cheerful person. However, after my first meeting with this couple, I began to have doubts. It all started in early autumn, when Maria suggested inviting her new colleague Mark and his wife to our home for dinner to get to know each other better. I saw no reason to refuse. It was a good way to improve the relationship, especially since Maria spent so much time working with Mark. The weather that evening was surprisingly pleasant for mid-September. Soft, warm air filled the yard with the aromas of fading leaves and still green grass, and a light breeze lifted the mood. I took charge of preparing the main course and thought through the menu in advance. He fried chicken breasts and juicy sausages on the grill, which were covered with a delicious golden crust, emitting an aroma that could whet anyone's appetite. Meanwhile, Maria worked on the side dishes, creating some stunning salads. One of them contained fresh vegetables, crisp lettuce, bright red cherry tomatoes, sweet corn, and thinly sliced onions. The second was more filling, with boiled potatoes, eggs, and green onions, dressed with homemade mayonnaise. Maria always knew how to make dinner special. Mark and Susie arrived on time, and their arrival immediately filled the house with excitement. Mark looked confident and calm, his manners were impeccable, and his conversations were interesting. He truly gave the impression of being the intelligent and mature man Maria described him as. Susie, on the other hand, was much more flamboyant and boisterous. At first glance, she struck me as a person who loves to be the center of attention. Her laughter sounded a little louder than necessary, and her gestures were exaggeratedly expressive. She praised everything from the taste of the food to the decor of our house, but in her words I sensed something insincere, as if she was trying to make too good an impression. We spent the evening chatting, joking, and discussing a variety of topics. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about Susie that didn't inspire complete confidence in me. She didn't seem to quite fit in with the surroundings. It seemed that her interests and lifestyle were far from the values that Maria and I always put first. Although I tried to be hospitable and polite, I was already beginning to form cautious doubts about this couple. Mark turned out to be a handsome young man of 24 years old. He was taller than me by a couple of inches. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall. His figure showed a passion for sports, although he had a small belly, which, at about 95 kilograms, did not look excessive. This gave him a slightly relaxed and friendly appearance, making him less strict and more inviting. His brown hair, the same as mine, was slightly disheveled, but looked well-groomed, and his brown eyes sparkled with warmth, which added to his charm. Mark was charismatic, and from the first minutes impressed me as a pleasant person who easily finds a common language with others. His demeanor, soft tone of speech, and sincere interest in the conversation immediately endeared him to everyone. His wife, Susie, left a completely different impression. At first glance, she seemed unnaturally bright to me, as if she was trying too hard to stand out. There was something about her appearance and behavior that reminded me of a former dancer. Perhaps I was wrong, but her appearance seemed to scream about the desire to attract attention. Her choice of clothing for a dinner attended by mostly older people seemed strange, to say the least. The top she wore was so tight that her breasts literally fell out of the plunging neckline. She had a thin build, but her breasts clearly could not be natural. They were impressive implants, no smaller than an F size. They stood too high and proud, emphasizing the artificiality of her image. Her hair, bleached to a light blonde and accented with purple streaks, was appropriate for her age, but did not at all harmonize with her sharp features. Instead of softness, they added even more eccentricity to her, making her appearance emphatically bright but not sophisticated. She had a narrow, almost flat butt, which contrasted with her huge breasts, and all this created the impression of imbalance. I thought her natural breast size was probably an A or a B at most, which would suit her petite frame much better. She was probably an inch shorter than Maria, about 5'7", and compared to Mark, she looked petite. But despite this, she tried to stand out in the way she carried herself and spoke. However, what struck me most was her behavior. She came into my house with a self-confidence that I could still understand, but she did a completely unacceptable thing. She lit a cigarette without asking permission. It was a shock for me. I barely had time to say anything when the air was already filled with the unpleasant smell of tobacco. It was a huge faux pas, and I felt irritated, although I tried not to show it. Susie was, without a doubt, a person who lived by her own rules, regardless of how her behavior was perceived by others. This created the feeling that her interests and lifestyle were completely different from ours, and although I tried to remain hospitable, her presence made me wary. Overall, the dinner went well. After that, Maria asked what I thought about her new colleague and his wife. I admitted that Mark made a good impression, but I was not impressed with Susie. Maria seemed a little disappointed by this. In the fall, we invited them to our home several more times and also visited them in their apartment a couple of times. I felt uncomfortable there, as the smell of cigarette smoke was almost unbearable for my middle-aged lungs. We decided it was better to have meetings at our home if we weren't planning on going out together. We also went to concerts and had dinner with this couple, and I must admit we had a pretty good time. Dancing was out of the question for me. I love to dance, but only with Maria. On the rare occasions when we went to the dance club after dinner, Maria and Mark tried to convince me to dance with Susie. Out of politeness, I agreed a couple of times, but this woman was like a leech. She clung to me, pressed her huge breasts against my stomach, and rubbed herself against me. One time she even tried to rub her pelvis against my leg. That dance didn't last long, I can tell you that. I had no interest in how she wanted to dance. As far as I know, Maria could go dancing when she went out with Susie on her girls' nights. As long as my wife remained faithful to me, I wasn't going to deprive her of her pleasure. Shortly after the New Year, Maria asked me an unexpected question. We were enjoying late-night caresses when she asked, "Do you think Susie is attractive?" I must admit that I asked her to repeat the question. Why she chose this particular moment to ask such a question, and why she asked it at all, I didn't know, but it threw me off the mood, to be honest. I pulled away. "What did you say?" While I'm sure many men and some women find her attractive, I don't think so. It's not her looks per se, but her overall image. Her breasts are so big that if she stopped abruptly, they would fall off. I don't think so. I like unnatural hair colors, and I don't like smokers. We don't even have much in common to talk about, since she's from a different generation. So, to answer your question, no, I don't find her attractive. What if she were the only woman on earth, and you were the only man? Would you sleep with her then? I bowed my head in her direction. Where did this come from, and what does she want from me? I decided to avoid a direct answer. It's more of an academic question since I had the procedure, and I can't help continue the human race. That's an academic question. What if you could conceive a child and could help revive humanity? Then it would be my responsibility. I wouldn't necessarily find her attractive, although that might help. Why are you asking that? Susie and I were talking the other day. She said she thought you were handsome and wondered if you found her as attractive as she found you. I shrugged. The mood was ruined, and I believe Maria's too. I had a random thought. Are you saying that you and Susie talk about what we do in bed? God, how she blushes easily. This gave her away. Then she tried to deny it. No, we were just talking in general. I told her that I thought Mark was attractive and that he probably broke more than one heart before he fell in love with her. And then Susie told me that she was thinking about you. So you don't sit around and discuss sizes, techniques, and how we men perform in bed. She blushed again. No, I would never do that to you. We always agreed to keep such intimate details only in our bedroom. Her answer did not particularly reassure me. Her blush was too obvious. I decided to leave it and lay down next to her. I wasn't in the mood to have sex right now. Maria raised herself on her elbows and looked at me. What happened? I thought we were going to have fun today. Why did you stop? I looked at her with the most neutral expression on my face. I lost my temper. Sorry, I'll make up for it another time. She looked at me with pure amazement. She was silent for a while, and I lay on my back with my eyes closed. Are you mad at me because I asked if you thought Susie was attractive? I didn't open my eyes because I didn't want to read her body language at that moment. Something was wrong, and I didn't want to deal with it so late in the evening. In my experience, Maria could stay up late into the night if she was trying to prove her point to me. I just wanted to leave this and discuss it with a fresh mind in the morning. I still answered her. You chose the worst possible time to ask this question, and it killed all thoughts of sex in me. If that's not enough to answer your question about how I feel about Susie Billings, then I can't explain myself better. But I'm still excited. I might have been rude, but we were just disagreeing a little, not arguing. I gave in and we made love. Then I pulled the sheets on and prepared to slip into sleep. Maria lay silent for some time. I'm sure she was thinking about what had just happened, as I was usually always ready to continue. Finally, she turned off her night light and leaned her back to me. Finally, she gave up and fell asleep. Then I fell asleep, but I had disturbing dreams in which Maria, Susie, and Mark were laughing at some joke at my expense, and I could not understand what was funny about it. When I woke up, I still felt tired. The sheet was twisted around my legs and Maria was hugging the other side of the bed. I untangled myself from the material and stood up to begin my morning ritual. Usually Maria sleeps while I finish shaving and showering. The water gurgles quietly in the bathroom, steam fills the mirror, and the scent of mint shower gel fills the air. Opening the window slightly, I feel the cool morning breeze and take a deep breath, enjoying the freshness of the new day. Meanwhile, Maria, comfortably wrapped in a blanket, continues to sleep peacefully in our bedroom, where the soft rays of the sun break through the slightly open blinds, playing on her face. As I emerge from the bathroom, buttoning a fresh shirt and carefully tying my tie, Maria begins to wake up. She slowly stretches, sits up on the bed, and, still sleepy, heads to the bathroom to clean herself up. While she is doing her business, I go down to the kitchen. I used to brew coffee in a Turk, watching the aromatic drink boil on the stove, but now everything is simpler. Our new one-cup coffee machine fills the kitchen with the invigorating smell of freshly brewed coffee in seconds. I take out our favorite cereal, put the milk on the table, and glance out the window, outside of which the city is gradually awakening to life. Our daughter Stacy usually wakes up on her own. Her light steps are heard on the stairs, and now she is joining us, with slightly tousled hair and an unchanging smile. She immediately reaches for her favorite orange juice. By this moment, Maria is already fully dressed and collected. Her image is always impeccable. We sit down to breakfast, a brief moment of silence that allows us to enjoy the calm of the morning before everyone goes about their business. After breakfast, I take my things and leave the house, heading to the factory, which is located on the outskirts of the city. It takes me about 30 minutes to get there, and I spend that half-hour driving, listening to the radio and thinking about the day ahead. Maria leaves later. Her school is only 10 minutes away. Stacy, now fully prepared, takes her keys and drives to her school, which is located 20 minutes from home. This is how our day begins, familiar, calm, and filled with rhythm, in which everyone knows their place and time. This morning, Maria interrupted my shaving. "How are you feeling? You were very restless last night. I had to sleep on the edge of the bed because you kept twitching." I just shrugged. I still have vague fragments of dreams or maybe nightmares in my head, but nothing that I could voice. I don't know, maybe the work is a little stressful. Obviously, she was not satisfied with my answer, but she did not insist. She simply went to the shower to clean herself up. When she came out, she hugged me from behind. "I know that I owe you for last night, and today I intend to pay it all back, big boy." I smiled at her reflection in the mirror and then turned and kissed her before heading off to take a shower. The working day was quite ordinary, no surprises or exciting moments. Current affairs went on as usual, and minor problems were solved with the usual ease without causing much trouble. A calm atmosphere reigned in the office. The noise of keyboards, ringing phones, and the familiar aroma of coffee from the coffee machine created the background of the day. Colleagues talked among themselves, discussing work tasks and plans for the evening, but nothing that could break out of the routine happened. As usual, after work I headed to the gym for an hour-long workout. This ritual became a way for me to reboot after a day filled with monotonous office bustle. The hall greeted me with the usual bustle, the hum of the exercise equipment, rhythmic music from the speakers, and the sounds of heavy breathing from those who were working hard on the treadmills or lifting weights. Today, however, I decided to change the usual scenario and went to a rarely used area of the gym, where there was a punching bag and a punching bag. This corner of the gym seemed almost abandoned, a dusty mat, dim lights, and a small rack of gloves that had clearly not been picked up for a long time. Our gym was not focused on MMA or martial arts, and such equipment was perceived as exotic here. However, as I learned, the owner recently decided to develop this area by investing in the purchase of equipment. As I began to warm up, the owner, a tall man with an energetic smile and a keen gaze, approached me. He offered to show me some basic exercises with a punching bag. His movements were clear, well coordinated, each accompanied by an explanation: how to hold his hands correctly, how to strike, how to move to avoid injury. At first, I carefully repeated after him, feeling how the muscles, accustomed to standard training, protested against the new loads. Gradually, I got into a rhythm. The blows became more confident. The sounds of hitting the bag resounded dully throughout the hall, causing me unexpected satisfaction. Soon I felt like my body was exhausted. The muscles, tired after a day of work, worked in a new way, as if I was awakening them from a long slumber. Sweat streamed down his forehead, his breathing became heavy, but this feeling of working to the limit brought strange pleasure. The training ended faster than I expected. I was completely exhausted, but satisfied, feeling pleasantly tired in every movement. Leaving the hall, I paused at the door, breathing in the fresh evening air and feeling the pleasant warmth spreading through my body. This day, although it started as a routine day, ended with a new experience that energized me. For some reason, an inner voice told me to get ready. I didn't bother to analyze my premonitions. I just followed this feeling and began to imagine Mark's face on the punching bag while I was practicing punches. When my arms were tired, I switched to the treadmill and ran for 20 minutes, after which I finished the workout, showered, and headed home. When I came home, Maria was not there. I shrugged. I returned a little earlier than usual and decided that she was probably at some school event. About 10 minutes later, the sound of the garage door was heard, and soon Maria entered the house. Seeing my car, she realized that I was already home. "Honey, you came back earlier than usual from the gym today. Did something happen? Are you feeling unwell?" She kissed me and put her hand to my forehead. "Do you have a fever?" I shook my head. "No, I just tried a new workout and my arms are completely exhausted. I only have enough strength left to shower and get dressed. I'll be fine after a good night's sleep." She quickly prepared a healthy salad and we had dinner. There was little talk. After dinner, we went to the living room and watched TV. It's amazing that with hundreds of channels, we always choose a few favorites, and today it was reruns of a home renovation show. I let my mind wander as we watched one of the shows for the 40th or 50th time. I didn't really think about anything. I wasn't excited, I was just relaxing next to my wife. By bedtime, I wasn't expecting any sex. Maria did not give any signals that she wanted intimacy. I stripped down to my regular boxers and got into bed while she took a quick shower. There was nothing new or unusual in our evening rituals. Maria came out of the bathroom wearing a long t-shirt, as usual. She got into bed, turned off the light, and we plunged into darkness. I found her face in the twilight, kissed her goodnight, and got ready to turn on my side in my usual sleeping position. Maria stopped me. "Hey, don't you remember what I promised this morning?" I shrugged. "I remember, but you didn't say or show anything that you wanted love from me this evening. I thought you forgot." This has happened before. Over the years of marriage, we have promised each other sexual pleasures many times, which were not always fulfilled. She kissed me passionately. I promised. Now I must say that no man will ever refuse the pleasure offered by his wife. No, never. I couldn't think of a reason to refuse. She introduced a couple of new tricks to our intimacy. I so wanted to ask where she got such thoughts and ideas, but I restrained myself. There is an old saying, "Don't ask a question if you don't want to know the answer." Her answer could ruin the moment, and I really wanted my relaxation. Our lives have returned to their usual rhythm, which seems to have adjusted to the quiet melody of everyday life. Several weeks passed in the ordinary course of affairs, with the days merging into a soft, monotonous succession. As usual, I continued to go for a run, a couple of evenings a week, enjoying the coolness and calm of the streets. The fresh air was invigorating, and the rhythmic sound of sneakers on the asphalt seemed to set the pace for my thoughts. But now sport has become more than just a routine for me. I immersed myself deeper and deeper into training with elements of martial arts. It was a new, exciting challenge that made me feel my body differently. Every evening in the gym turned into a special ritual, putting on a comfortable sports uniform, tugging on the gloves, and then the first blows on the punching bag. Every time I struck, I felt muscles tense that had previously seemed almost invisible. My arms, shoulders, even my body, everything was included in the work, creating a harmonious movement. I began to notice how my coordination was changing. Each exercise with a pair honed the speed of the blow, each movement around the gym added agility. Sometimes I stayed in the bag a little longer than usual, working until fatigue took over. It was a pleasant fatigue, the kind that makes your body ache, but along with it comes a feeling of pride. Over time, training became not only a physical challenge, but also a test of endurance. Gradually, I learned to distribute my energy so as not to burn out too quickly and to concentrate on each movement. At these moments, I was completely involved in the process. It seemed that the whole world around me was disappearing, leaving me alone with the punching bag and the sound of my blows. These classes not only changed my body, but also made me feel stronger and more confident. It was a new stage that filled my routine with something lively and energetic, as if adding a powerful chord to the usual rhythm. Our sex life is also back to normal. We made love several times a week. There were conversations that made me keep my eyes open and look for possible problems. I remember one evening Maria was reading a magazine, Cosmopolitan, where there was some kind of survey about sex. She suggested that I go through it together and compare the answers. Several questions related to partner exchange and sex with multiple partners. One of them asked if I had ever fantasized about partner swapping or watching my partner have sex with someone else. I decided to answer yes honestly, since I really had such fantasies. Maria looked extremely pleased until I added that these were just fantasies, and I was absolutely not ready to embody them in real life. This led us to talk about exchanging partners. I wondered why she was so excited by my fantasies. Her answer was a little vague, mine was not. Just wondering why you have this fantasy, but you never talk about it. Why? Maria, there are things that perhaps should not be brought into the light, so to speak. I began, trying to choose my words carefully in order to convey my thoughts without unnecessary harshness. My voice was low and calm, but there was some heaviness in it. The topic I touched upon was not an easy one. I looked into her eyes, and in their depths I noticed a slight shadow of bewilderment mixed with interest. I sometimes find it exciting to imagine things like sex with multiple partners. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Maria tensed slightly, but did not look away, waiting for the continuation. I continued, trying to be as sincere as possible. But I am mature enough to understand that there is a huge gap between fantasy and reality. It's not the same thing. For example, let's say one day I convince you to try something like partner swapping. We go to a party, and there you meet someone who awakens in you emotions and desires that I could never evoke. My hand automatically went to the cup on the table, and I took a sip of water to soothe my dry throat. A tense silence hung in the room, broken only by occasional sounds from outside the window. Imagine that at that moment you feel something so vivid that it begins to displace our past. It may not have a significant impact on our lives at first. Maybe it will simply remain in memories as some kind of bold experiment. But I am sure that a similar experience with another, more suitable partner will begin to leave cracks in our marriage. Over time, these cracks can grow into abyss. I took a deep breath, choosing words so as not to sound like a reproach, but an explanation. Once you find out that someone else is capable of turning you on more than me, it will gradually begin to erode your perception of me. I will feel not good enough, inadequate as a lover, as a husband. And you, albeit not immediately, will begin to feel dissatisfaction with our life. All this can lead to the fact that we begin to move away from each other. And ultimately, I fell silent, avoiding uttering the word divorce, although it was the obvious conclusion of the thought. My words sounded not like condemnation or prohibition, but like a warning, like the reflection of a person who is trying to protect what is dear to him. I squeezed her hand, hoping she would feel my sincerity. She shook her head in disagreement. "Look at it from the other side," I began, trying to speak softly but confidently to get my point across. My palm unconsciously slid across the table, as if I wanted to find support in physical contact. Maria, on the contrary, sat calmly, her gaze focused on me, although a slight tension flashed in her eyes. "Let's say we decide to do this and exchange partners with someone new. You meet a man who turns out to be a disgusting person," I continued, putting all the power of imagination into my words. "He doesn't respect you. He's incapable of arousing either interest or admiration. After that night, you feel disappointed and perhaps even insulted. You understand that it was a huge mistake, and you do not have the slightest desire to repeat this experience." I fell silent for a second, pausing to give her time to imagine this picture. Then I continued, trying to avoid harshness, but without leaving the point. "And I, in turn, meet another woman who, for some reason, makes a strong impression on me. Maybe it's her charisma, her way of speaking, or maybe her physical attractiveness. She seems new and unusual to me, and I begin to admire her. I can't hide it, and you, of course, notice that my emotions have changed." My breathing became a little heavier as I tried to convey what Maria might have experienced. "This makes you resentful. You begin to despise me for allowing myself to become attracted to someone else, even if it does not develop into something more. Resentment turns into irritation, and irritation quietly penetrates our everyday life. We start to find fault with each other. Any little things from an unwashed cup to forgotten words turn into a reason for conflict. I met her gaze, hoping that she would catch the important point I was trying to convey. Gradually, we stopped seeing in each other what connected us. Everything we have built over the years is beginning to crumble. Instead of trust and love, only mutual reproaches remain. And one day, perhaps without even fully realizing it, we decide to separate because nothing holds us together anymore. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, feeling the picture painted with words hanging heavily in the air. My heart sank at the mere thought of such a scenario, and I hoped that Maria would also feel the depth of the possible consequences. She shook her head again. "Let's just agree," I said, trying to speak calmly, but with some conviction in my voice. My eyes lingered on her face, catching the slightest changes in expression, as if I wanted to make sure that my words were getting through to her. Fantasies must remain fantasies. This is their nature, their peculiarity. They live in our heads, where everything obeys our rules. There we can build any scenarios, play with any ideas, because we have complete control over how and how it will end. I paused, searching for words to convey what I was feeling. But real life is completely different, Maria. There was a slight sadness in my voice, as if I was really worried about both of us. No matter how hard we try to imagine all the possible consequences, reality will always find a way to surprise us. It is complex, unpredictable, and often much harsher than the stories we create in our imaginations. In dreams, we can live our whole lives in one moment, experience everything we want, and at any moment press pause, erase the bad, and try again. But in reality, everything is different. I looked away, looking out the window for a moment, beyond which the evening street was slowly sinking into twilight. One wrong action, one decision that seems harmless, can set off a chain of events that we can no longer stop. The consequences of such a step cannot be predicted, no matter how hard you try, and we certainly won't be able to control them. It's like throwing a stone down a hill. You don't know what destruction it will cause. My words hung in the air, and I returned to her gaze, trying to express sincerity and care. Therefore, it is better to leave fantasies where they belong, I continued more softly. Within us. They can be beautiful, bright, even inspiring. But that's their limit. They are our safe space where everything remains under our control. But the real world, it is much more complex and unforgiving of mistakes. I bowed my head slightly, waiting for her answer, hoping that she would feel that these words were spoken not out of fear, but out of an understanding of the fragility of what she and I have. She changed tactics. Her voice became a little softer, but still sounded with a hint of challenge. "Adult films," she began, leaning on the table and looking at me carefully, "where they never seem to have any problems after hot sex. On the contrary, it looks as if it frees them." Her words sounded confident, but I noticed a slight sparkle in her eyes, a mixture of curiosity and an attempt to find a new twist in the conversation. She was looking for a way to get her point across, but I couldn't help but smile. "Of course," I chuckled, shaking my head. "But as in Hollywood, all this is an illusion." She narrowed her eyes, clearly waiting for him to continue. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest, as if I was about to launch into a long tirade. "Understand, Maria," I said, trying not to sound edifying, but rather with a bit of irony. "Behind every such film there is a script. Someone sat at the table, inventing characters, their desires and actions. All these passions, emotions, dramas are just lines on paper, which are then embodied by the actors. And no matter how good or bad these actors are, they are just following the director's instructions." I paused to let her process what I had said, then continued, leaning forward slightly to give my words more weight. "In these films, everything is predetermined. Every look, every gesture, every scene is filmed in such a way as to evoke the desired reaction in the viewer. Even when they show something extreme, like violence or torture, it always ends exactly as the director intended. He has an ending that he controls from start to finish." I paused, thoughtfully tapping my finger on the table. But life is a completely different story. There is no script, no director who will intervene if something goes wrong. Here you can't say stop and reshoot the moment. If something breaks, if the consequences are not what you expected, it can be much more difficult to fix it. And there are no guarantees of a happy ending, only what happens in the end. I looked at her, and my expression became serious, even a little stern. This conversation was important, and I wanted her to feel the depth of my thoughts. Let's be honest, I began slowly, choosing my words so that they sounded sincere and direct. I don't know about other men, but I'm built a certain way, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of you, Maria. I'm proud of the way you look, the way you carry yourself. You are beautiful, smart, confident, and I am pleased to know that you are my wife. When we go out somewhere together, I like that you are next to me, that you hold my hand. It gives me a feeling of pride. I paused for a moment, remembering how her beauty and charm always attracted attention. And I don't mind the looks you get. I even like it when other men notice you. Sometimes these are women. This also happened, and I saw their looks. This proves that I'm not the only one who notices how amazing you are. I smiled, but that smile quickly disappeared when I started talking about another, more painful aspect. And this isn't important, but my voice became harsher, as if I wanted to emphasize the significance of my words. I absolutely hate it when some guy who clearly has no shame or respect decides he can afford more. He believes that he has the right to flirt with you, drop hints, or even worse, ask you to spend an evening, night, or even weekend with him. He might think he's charming enough to offer you a vacation, a slow dance, whatever. I exhaled heavily, and there were notes of anger in my voice that I could barely contain. It's moments like these that make me turn into a caveman. And if you say that this has already happened, then you will be right. I am able to make it clear to you and any impudent person that you are my woman, and I am your man. I don't need to say this twice. I looked at her, making sure she heard and felt my sincerity. And here's the important thing. I don't want to flirt with another woman. Never. I know what it might look like from the outside, how it might feel to you, and I'm not willing to risk that for something fleeting. I paused briefly before continuing, this time even more slowly and with even more weight in my voice. I can picture it in my head. I can think of how it could be, but I also know that any attempt to make such a thing a reality would destroy too much. My self-respect, your respect for me, your love, your trust and faith in my devotion. This is too high a price to pay for a moment's pleasure. I leaned closer to let her know how seriously I took my words. And I will never agree to this. Because for me, the most important thing is us. You, me, our connection. Everything else is not worth destroying. Finally, she understood my position. When I asked how she herself felt about the exchange of partners, she bit her lip, began to answer, but then decided to give an evasive answer. I understand where you're coming from, Troy, and I can see why you might have serious doubts about the long-term consequences of this lifestyle. I guess I was just wondering how honestly you would answer the question. Notice how she didn't answer whether she wanted to try a new partner herself. As I said, this was an avoidance of the question. One more item for my growing collection of sightings. An alarming pattern began to form in my head. She read a question from a magazine about whether I would like to watch two members of the opposite sex make love to each other. Again, this is the fantasy of most men I know, at least since the internet became rife with adult videos. But as with any other fantasy, the consequences of such an act, especially if one of the women is you, can lead to a loss of respect on my part, a loss of trust and faith, and ultimately to the collapse of us as a couple. I turned the question back to her. Now I want an honest answer, not what you think I want to hear. Would you like to watch two men being intimate with each other? She bit her lip again, contemplating how to formulate a politically correct response. She mumbled for a bit before finally speaking. In the abstract, I find the idea of two men, especially muscular and strong ones like you, having intense sex arousing. I assume you want me to be the one? She started to answer, but after looking at my face, she quickly tried to deny it. No, I usually just watch videos or daydream about two faceless men doing it. I put her almost honest answer in the piggy bank for further analysis. One more piece to the overall puzzle. We continued with a survey. After that, I insisted that she answer the questions first. She admitted that she was sometimes attracted to other women, but said that she never pursued such attractions. When I asked specifically about Susie, she blushed and lowered her head before saying, "No, I'm not attracted to Susie. Why do you ask?" I shrugged. I was wondering after you made such a big deal out of it that I wasn't attracted to her. I thought maybe you wanted her and I to end up in the same bed, and then you would join in. Maria blushed again, shaking her head in denial. I thought, she's lying, but didn't say anything. She turned the question towards me. It was about whether I was attracted to someone of the same gender, in case you hadn't guessed by now. I didn't hesitate. You know, I played on the sports team in school. We all showered together after every practice and game. I saw everyone naked at one point. Not once did I feel sexually attracted to any of my teammates. And they were all in great physical shape, and I was going through the hormonal changes of adolescence. So no, I'm not attracted to men, not any man. For some reason, she was very disappointed with my answer. One more information for further analysis. She asked another question, clearly not from the questionnaire. What if you find yourself in a situation like a sex party and a man shows a lot of interest in you, intimacy, but no commitment on your part? Would you let a man touch you? The simple answer is that I would never be at such a party, so the question becomes meaningless. As for the real answer you are looking for, it is no. I would try to be as tactful as possible and gently refuse this poor man, but I have no interest to sex with men in any form. We continued with other questions. We have completed the survey. I was even glad that she insisted on my participation in it. I learned several new things about my wife. She is interested in extramarital sex in the form of partner exchange. She is intrigued by the idea of female sex, although she denies ever trying it. She would like to see me having sex with another man. I don't think she liked the survey as much as I did. She learned that despite my sexual fantasies, I had no intention of acting out them. She also realized that I was completely against male sex. Of course, this increased my suspicions about her teacher Mark. Combined with his youth, looks, and personality, as well as her work nights and other school activities that Maria had never previously seen a need to participate in, I began to suspect that something might be going on. But the main question was, what should I do about it? That night, I began my journey to keep my wife. When we got into bed, I was a little more aggressive than usual. I usually waited to see if she would show any sign that she was in the mood for intimacy. After so many years of marriage, this has become habitual for me, as I think it is for most married men. The woman controls sex. That night, I lied to her and made up a story to fuel her fantasy. I told her that one of my fantasies was to come home and find her in bed with her lover. At first, as I described, I would be angry at her deception. This story seems to have become a trigger. Our life has returned to its usual rhythm, like a calm river that has returned to its channel after a short flood. The morning started the same way. We got up, had breakfast, and walked Stacy to school. I often noticed Maria lovingly adjusting her school backpack or fixing her hair, wanting everything to look perfect. These small moments have become a symbol of our morning calm. After that, we went about our business. Maria went to school, where her students were waiting for her, and I went to the office. Most often, Maria returned home by 4 o'clock in the afternoon because classes ended at 3:30. I followed my standard schedule, sitting at the computer until 5 p.m., sometimes staying a few minutes late to finish things and returning home around 5:45. When I entered the house, familiar aromas were already in the air, either fresh bread or stewed vegetables. Maria liked to start cooking even before I arrived, but the idea of dinner itself remained our common activity. We often cooked together, discussing the little things of the day, laughing about things, or just enjoying this calm, routine activity that strengthened our bond. Once a week, Stacy, with her youthful enthusiasm, took up cooking. At first, her successes were modest. Hot dogs and hamburgers became her first culinary arsenal. She cooked them with pride, even if the sausages were slightly burnt and the buns were cut sloppily. We supported her, smiling and praising even the simplest dishes. Over time, her skills began to grow. She watched Maria with interest, learning from her the tricks and secrets that Maria knew as an experienced cook. Stacy was no longer afraid to experiment, trying new recipes and adding unexpected ingredients to her dishes. Sometimes her efforts led to real success. Homemade pasta with thick tomato sauce or tender pancakes with berry filling could decorate any table. True, not everything always went smoothly. There were days when her experiments left her stomach a little confused. Too much spice or too thick sauce made the dishes a little heavy. But even in such moments, we supported her, pretending that we liked everything, and with a smile asked to add a little less salt or oil next time. These evenings spent at dinner became not just a routine for us, but an important ritual that united us. We laughed, discussed the news, and made plans, enjoying the fact that we had such simple, but such important stability in life. In the evenings, after dinner, we cleaned everything in the kitchen. Then Stacy sat down to study with loud music, accompanied by calls and correspondence with friends. Despite this, she managed to maintain a high GPA. Maria and I went into the living room and watched TV. If we didn't find anything interesting, we picked up our old favorite home renovation shows and dreamed of what we could do with the house if we had unlimited funds. Sometimes they even took up paper and pencil to sketch out ideas. One evening, we were discussing what the new master bedroom should look like. Maria surprised me by saying she wanted a love chair. It was a special piece of furniture that was claimed to help in various sexual positions. When I asked her how she heard about such a chair, she hesitated and then said that Susie and Mark use it and praise it, saying that it improves the sexual experience. "Have you seen him in person?" I asked. She blushed deeply again and shook her head. I couldn't resist and faked it. "You're so excited about this love chair. I thought you'd at least want to take a look at it since it seems pretty expensive. Is it comfortable? Do we really want to have something like that in the house where our kids can see it? Is it obvious? What is the purpose of the chair? What if we have grandchildren? Will we let them play on it, knowing what it is used for?" Maria was speechless and could not answer a single question without revealing her insincere answers. Suddenly, our conversation about remodeling the bedroom stopped. I thought I might have won the round against Mark and Susie, but I was wrong. A week or so later, Maria shared her latest plan with me. She decided not to go to the bar with Susie for drinks and dancing so often. Instead, she announced that Susie would be teaching a new exercise class at the gym. It will be a combination of yoga and exotic dancing. Maria spoke with delight about her plan. "I'll get fit for you and maybe increase my flexibility. Who knows, maybe one day I'll even give you a dance. What do you think?" In my heart, I doubted the idea, but I did not voice my concerns. After all, what could I base myself on? I didn't particularly like Susie, but I had no concrete evidence that she was someone I wanted to keep away from my wife. I had suspicions, but absolutely no evidence of cheating or intentions to cheat. I decided to keep my doubts to myself for now. We continued to live as usual. I continued my evening runs and gym sessions twice a week. Sometimes I watched the women who took Susie's classes. It was interesting to see the variety of bodies performing the exercises. Some became quite fluid in their dance moves, but most resembled cows swaying to music. Don't ask me what their pole dancing attempts looked like, but everyone, including Maria, was clearly getting more tone thanks to these workouts. She really liked the teasing dance moves and moved better than anyone, even seducing the pole. However, this did not particularly affect our intimate life. We still made love a couple times a week. Sometimes I took the initiative and dominated a little. One evening, we finally decided to try a new type of sex for us. The next morning, I showered and shaved first thing before Maria got up. When I was getting dressed, I noticed that she was walking with difficulty. At my questioning glance, she smiled shyly and said, I know it will pass soon, so don't worry." I almost said something stupid. A week or so ago, she came home in the evening after a school meeting and also limped, just like now. Then she explained it as pain in her ankle due to some pebbles she stepped on while getting into the car. It seems I lost the race for my wife's fidelity. It seemed like I should have started some kind of investigation now, but I didn't know where to start. I decided to discuss this with several of my employees. We must understand that in our strong economy, we have had to attract potential employees who, in normal times or times of economic downturn, would be unlikely to be hired. This included people who were known to occasionally break the law. We conduct a full background check on every candidate and test them for prohibited substances. Some are not screened or tested, but still get the job, especially for skilled positions that are difficult to fill. I typically interview each new employee in my territory personally and discuss their weaknesses honestly. Sometimes this is due to arrears of child support. Then we develop a plan to withhold part of the salary to pay off the debt. Sometimes we have to go to court to get a judge to approve a repayment plan. Sometimes the problem is more serious. If the new employee has a criminal record, we discuss how potential violations will be addressed. If this is due to the use of illegal substances, I explicitly say that any subsequent test failure will be grounds for immediate termination. The trade will also be immediately reported to the police. Most new employees are so excited to get a second chance that they are willing to do anything to keep their job. The few who don't understand this usually quit on the first day. When I arrived at work, I called my day supervisor and my night supervisor, who was finishing his shift, for a short meeting. Max Wilson was imprisoned twice for robbery. My night supervisor, Brock Miller, had been convicted of multiple assaults and was now taking an anger management course. Both were excellent employees for many years, which led to their promotion to supervisors. Having ex-prisoners as supervisors sent two signals to new employees. First, if you work well, you have a chance to get promoted. Second, ex-prisoners have already seen and heard everything, so excuses for bad work habits won't fly. I told Max and Brock my suspicions about Maria. I love her, but I will not tolerate cheating. Max was the first to propose a plan. "Boss, I know we're all keeping things in line, but I have a couple of guys who could wiretap this guy and his wife to dig up some dirt if you want." I thought that anything found this way would be unlikely to be accepted in court, but it was one of the options. Brock suggested a different approach. "Since you think that this teacher and his wife are a problem, I can find a couple of guys who will convey to him the message that sleeping with a married woman is not a good idea. I think they will get the message quickly." We discussed the scope of possible actions, and I thanked them for their help. We didn't do anything that day. I spent some time on the computer studying spy devices. I even thought about putting a bug on Maria's phone, but she has a terrible habit of forgetting it several times a week, so that wasn't the best option. I found a small device that could be hidden in her purse. This was a good option since she never forgot her bag. I ordered the device, and it was supposed to be delivered tomorrow. This gave me all weekend to install it. After lunch, Max returned to my office. "Look, boss, I hope I don't piss you off, but I remembered a couple of guys who needed money, so I asked them to go to the school where Maria teaches and start following her and her colleague. I thought that he's probably the only male teacher in the school, so he won't be hard to find." I nodded. It seems he was right. Mark was indeed the only male teacher at Maria's school. Even if he noticed the surveillance, it didn't connect her to me in any way, and I felt that Maria wouldn't come home angry, at least not today. I returned home and Maria prepared a delicious dinner. The three of us called the other kids on speakerphone to see how they were doing. It was a good evening. We even discussed buying an Amazon device so we could video chat with our kids. By bedtime, my thoughts started wandering again to whether Maria was cheating on me, and my mood for sex had plummeted. Knowing that she might have had sex with Mark made me feel bad. Maria apparently noticed the expression on my face and did not try to initiate sex. We exchanged a routine kiss, turned our backs to each other and fell asleep. At least she fell asleep. I lay awake, wondering what to do if it was confirmed that Maria had new sexual partners. I think, looking back, that's when my feelings for my beloved wife began to change. I loved her and wanted her to be mine forever, but I couldn't even bear the thought of her having sex with whoever she wanted and sharing my bed at the same time. I remember then I started to get angry at what she was apparently doing to us and our lives. Dark thoughts caused dark dreams that night and many nights after. These thoughts and dreams gradually changed my feelings. I started returning home a little later. He stayed at the factory, walked around the workshops, observed, and sometimes talked with the workers. I don't know if everyone liked it when I stopped for a short conversation, but I felt that I was beginning to get to know my employees better, and they, in turn, saw me as more than just a boss sitting in an office overlooking the workshop. Sometimes I would stop at a local bar on the way home for a drink. I somehow forgot that it's worth warning Maria that I'm late. For a while, she grumbled at me for not letting me know if I was going to come later, saying she was worried and didn't want to ruin dinner by serving it on time. But then she apparently realized that I was indifferent to her experiences and stopped raising this topic. One evening, when I came home an hour later than usual, she attacked me with complaints. "Troy, you need to give me a heads up if you're running late so I don't ruin dinner by serving it on time. You show complete disrespect for me when you don't even call or tell me what you're planning." I simply bowed my head slightly and stood silently while she reprimanded me. When she ran out of air, she demanded an answer. "Well, what do you say to that?" I shrugged. "Nothing. Nothing at all. I've eaten alone plenty of times in the past year when you're suddenly late at school or going to some school event. It's something you've never done before until you had a male teacher in your class. I have to tolerate it and not even discuss it, but if I do the same, you call it disrespect. It seems that in our house, it's not a two-way street at all." She started to answer something, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I was so worried about all these late nights and you're helping out at parent-teacher conferences that I called the school and talked to the principal. She said you don't get paid for working late, you don't have any extra responsibilities after school, and she doesn't understand why you say you're helping Mark. So what's really going on? You're dating someone, so I'm wondering if you're already cheating on me. Why can't you? Honest with me." She suddenly fell silent and turned to the stove. This was a bit funny since the dishes from my missed dinner were already washed, and there was nothing on the stove to check. I just turned around and went into the living room, sat down in my chair, and began mindlessly watching TV. As I sat there, I heard my wife of 22 years quietly walk past the living room and into the bedroom. I mentally shrugged. I was ready for an icy bed when I finally went to bed, but she surprised me by locking the door. A little passive-aggressive prank, I guess. I could have done the caveman thing and broken down the door, but I didn't. I was angry, but more upset and sad. She now knew that I had serious concerns about her and our marriage. Whatever happened next should not have come as a surprise to her. I didn't knock on the door, I didn't whine, I didn't beg, I didn't scream. I just took the pin key we kept at the top of the door frame for situations like this, opened the door, walked in, grabbed a blanket, a pillow, and a pair of shorts to sleep on. I knew that she was not sleeping, but she was pretending that she was sleeping. I didn't try to talk to her or even kiss her. I went to Mick's old room, lay down on the bed, and fell asleep. In the morning, I got up as usual, took a shower, shaved, quietly got dressed, and left the house without even drinking my usual cup of coffee. On the way, I stopped at McDonald's and got coffee, which is always hotter than hot, and went to the factory. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Before heading towards the bedroom, I attached a tiny recording device to her bag. Her bag had a flap over the outside pocket, so I attached the device to the inside of that flap. I doubted she would sense it and certainly wouldn't check her bag for such a device. It was a voice-activated device that could record up to 10 hours of audio before the memory ran out. I was hoping that the placement would allow for clear recordings, as if the device were inside the bag, the sound might be too muffled. I planned to download the recordings every night and listen to them, either after Maria went to bed or at work the next day. However, at work the whole day was distracted by small fires that needed to be extinguished, as well as a real fire in one of the dying rooms. We put it out, but according to protocol, we called the fire department, and I had to accompany them to the dye house to investigate. This took several hours. That evening I came home on time, but Maria was delayed. She didn't even make an attempt to warn me that she would be arriving late. I don't know if she thought that I would be late anyway, and therefore there was no need to warn me, or if she just didn't care whether I was home or not, or if she decided that now I should feel what she felt last night. I made myself soup and a sandwich and cleaned everything up before she arrived around 7 in the evening. I didn't ask why she was late, and she didn't give any explanation either. When she asked about dinner, she didn't seem to like it at all. I had already eaten and didn't wait for her. She was clearly not satisfied with my answer because I didn't know where she was or when she would return, so I just took care of myself. I went into the living room and watched the game on one of the sports channels while she went about her business, making herself a sandwich and a small salad. She brought it into the living room and began to eat without speaking to me once. She would give me dirty looks from time to time, but I would just ignore her and pretend to be engrossed in what was on the screen. After she finished, she stood up and left the living room and did not return. I heard her washing her plate, knife, and fork, and then she went into the bedroom again, and I assumed she had locked the door again. I waited a moment before taking out the recorder and loading the files onto my laptop. I then returned the device to its place, making sure it was charged. Putting on my Bluetooth headphones, I opened a search on Amazon for some gadget I was interested in before opening the file. This way, if Marie comes in, it will look like I'm surfing the internet and listening to music. This is something I do quite regularly. The first few files were just music from her trip, then her conversation with a barista at a coffee shop she frequents. After some time, she must have arrived at the school because she greeted Mark. I assumed she had put down her purse since their conversation was fairly quiet. I turned up the volume. "Good morning, Mark. Isn't it a beautiful day today?" "Now that you're here, Marie, yes, it's a beautiful day. Do you have anything new to share before the kids arrive?" "I don't know exactly, but I need to talk to you after school today. Troy made some comments last night that bother me." At that moment, I heard the children come in, and their conversation immediately became professional. Marie must have then placed her purse in a drawer or locker, as only a few snippets of noise were recorded after this. I looked at the files and decided to skip all the small files and go to the larger file that was recorded after school ended. The recording continued to unfold before me like an ominous puzzle, in which each word added new shadows to the picture of betrayal. The voices belonging to Mark, Marie, and their accomplice Susie sounded clear, almost painfully close, revealing a truth I would have preferred never to know. Mark spoke with a commanding, almost mocking tone, openly demonstrating his influence over Marie. He called her derogatory names, emphasizing her subordinate position. There was pleasure in his voice at the power he had over her. "You will do what I say," he repeated, and she, although restrained, still agreed. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger and pity as I heard my wife agree to his demands. Susie, in turn, acted as an accomplice. She supported Mark, adding a lightness and even fun to their conversation that seemed out of place. This was not just a betrayal, it was a carefully orchestrated humiliation. They discussed me as if I were a pawn in their game, an unsuspecting victim. Mark, with a grin in his voice, called me a rag, discussing plans to drag me into their crazy world. His strategy was frighteningly simple: alcohol, manipulation, and pressure. "You must invite us into the house," he told Marie, as if giving an order. "We'll spend the weekend so that he won't be able to resist. He won't be able to refuse." There was not a hint of doubt in his words, only cold confidence in his power. Marie tried to object. Her voice sounded softer and less confident, but this did not stop Mark. He rudely interrupted her, reminding her who was in charge here. She said something about how I might not give in to their plan, but her protests were drowned out by his ridicule. Mark's words sounded as if he had complete control over her, and with her, over me. The climax was her confession. "I think he suspects us." She spoke about this with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. At that moment, I realized her fear was not about me, but about the fact that her lie would be revealed. There was no remorse or regret in her voice, only worry that their secret might come to light. My head was boiling from what I heard. These recordings not only confirmed my worst fears, but also showed how deeply I was drawn into their dirty game. For them, I was just an obstacle, a hindrance on the way to their goals. They discussed my home, my life, my relationships as if I were empty space to be filled and moved around as they saw fit. By the end of the recording, I couldn't listen anymore. The volume of voices, their ridicule, cynical planning, and humiliation cut into me, leaving painful scars. It was not just a deception, it was a war in which I found myself an enemy, without even suspecting that it was going on. To be continued. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. She will be there very soon. The link to the sequel will be in the description of this video below. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to